Firstly, I want to say a big thanks to the whole TEDx team today. You've done an incredible job. I've spoken with a whole bunch of different people and they've been really satisfied with what's been going on, so thanks for doing a great job. So today I want to talk about an interesting challenge that I think we're all facing, and in particular I think this is a challenge that young people are facing. I know we have a lot of students in the audience here, and I think the challenge that we're facing, and especially young people are facing, is that the challenge that they're facing is that I think the way that young people are being raised and advised and taught to be successful in the world, I believe that that is now changing. And I think what has to happen in order for young people to be successful is different to what they're being taught to do. And so to give you an example of why I believe that's happening because technological innovation is happening at such a rate right now, at such a speed, that companies are, there's no certainty in companies anymore. And let me talk about an example that I've been thinking about for this particular event. So in the 1980s, Sony released the Walkman, and that was the portable digital cassette player. And back in the 1980s, it was an incredibly successful product that they launched, and with that product they were able to stay market leaders for about 7 or 8 years, and they didn't have to do much innovation, they didn't have to add much to that, they just had complete market dominance. Now moving into the 1990s, they maintained that position, but then they had to start innovating about every 4.5 years in order to maintain that position. Now fast forward to today, Apple is the leader in that market of portable communication. And would anyone like to hazard a guess as to what the product life cycle is like now for Apple in order for them to maintain their market leadership position? Okay, so I would guess that it's about 6 months. It's about 6 months, depending on how specific you go with the market, depending on how you define the market. It takes about 6 months for them. They have to innovate and create a brand new product every 6 months in order to maintain that leadership position. And so what that means is, because there's so much innovation going on, as we've seen with these markets, in order to maintain that leadership position, then that means that there's not as much certainty within the companies anymore, within businesses anymore, and therefore if you're looking to try to perhaps go down the traditional route of getting a job, then while it's still a valid goal to try to get a job, if you actually end up getting the job, the security and the certainty that used to exist isn't there anymore. And so if you look at someone like the company like IBM, for example, not long ago IBM used to be the archetypal example of a company which you work really, really hard to get a job at IBM, and then once you work at IBM, you have your job and you're sorted for life, and that's your entire career tracked for the rest of your life, and you can look after your family, you can be successful, and you can achieve all that working with IBM. Now, since then, in 1993, they announced job cuts of 60,000 people, and then recently in the news there are reports of them potentially cutting 100,000 people. I know they haven't exactly been confirmed, and they're saying that maybe that's not true. But the point is that the certainty that used to exist just doesn't exist anymore. And so moving forward, what that really means is that I believe what's taught in a lot of schools and a lot of educational systems, that the whole get a good job theory is incomplete. While I still think it's perfectly valid to get a job, once you get it, it doesn't think long term, basically. And so I think the way to overcome this challenge and the way to move forward is I believe there are 3 steps. And the 3 steps that I'd like to share are steps that I've personally figured out from observing some very successful people that I've been fortunate enough to become friends with, and also the steps that I've personally used to build my own business. We sell health, dating, and relationship products, and we've now sold thousands of products in over 100 different countries. And we've been able to touch a lot of people's lives as a result of that, and as a result of the strategies I'm going to share with you. So the first step that I'd like to recommend that everybody take is to consider alternate paths, because I think what happens when there's an interesting psychological phenomenon with humans, which is that once we take a certain amount of steps down one path, we feel compelled to continue further down that path. And so if if our education system, or if the people around us, if our peer group, or if our parents, or if institutions are encouraging us to go down one path which is no longer effective, then if we continue down that path without thinking strategically, then you may not end up exactly where you want to do. And so I was very much on that kind of tracked career path when I was younger. At school, my goal was always to get good grades, do well, so I could build up my CV or resume, and then build up loads of extracurricular activities so I could then eventually get that good job. But then at one stage, while I was at university, I started thinking longer term, like what happens after I get the job, where do I want to be in 5 years' time, 10 years' time, 20 years' time. And when I started thinking like that, I realised that where I wanted to be didn't align with the path that I'd taken so far. And so I recommend that you do the same. And I think if you start thinking longer term, exactly where you want to be, is the path that you've been travelling down the same as where you want to end up? And so sometimes what we find is when you do this, when you perform that exercise of thinking long term, you'll suddenly realise that you perhaps are not going in the same direction where you want to end up. And so then if that happens, you could potentially face a lot of challenges in terms of expectations of other people, what your peer group expect, what your family expect, and so forth. And so what I recommend to do to overcome that challenge is which is the second step that I'd like to share with you, which is to define your fears and define the worst case scenario. So say you're considering a different career path, or say you're considering doing something different in the future, or you're trying to make some kind of a different impact in the world to where your current path has led you to. Consider what the worst case scenario would be if you were to pursue this path, and try to create some kind of artificial constraint. So what I did personally for this particular example is I finished university, I decided I want to set up a business, and I ended up living back home with my parents. It just wasn't quite working out, and so in terms of my motivation to run the business. And so I set myself a 6-month challenge. And my 6-month challenge was to move to London. I got some savings together, and those 6 months, I had 6 months worth of saving to pay my rent. And then if after 6 months I wasn't making enough money in the business, I would have to go back home, potentially get a job, and go down that road. And so the fact that I was able to set that kind of fixed constraint gave me the confidence to actually try that out. Because had I not set that constraint, I would have probably seen starting a business as a endless potential road to failure. Whereas once I knew that I could handle the potential failure that may actually come from trying the business for 6 months, that gave me the confidence to try it out. So I recommend you do the same. And I have a really successful mentor actually that teaches a very similar thing. He teaches it to businesses. He's an incredible guy. He built a company and then sold it for £31 million, his personal valuation. And what he says is what people should do is, in business for example, if they're considering growing their business and they have to perhaps stretch their comfort zone of how much money they're prepared to put down in terms of a potential new investment. Quite often what happens is, say £10,000 is your comfort zone of a potential new investment. People get afraid to put the £10,000 down, and then they start rationalising, they start thinking reasons why it might not be effective, and they just come up with excuses to why they shouldn't do it. But then if you actually allocate in your head, what's the worst case scenario? I'll lose £10,000. The upside is perhaps I'll double my business and be able to help a lot more people as a result. Then that will give you the confidence to follow through on that. So it's just a different way of looking at things. And so then the final step that I want to share, which is relevant whether you're looking to start or grow a business or whether you're looking to get a job and go into the employment world, and that is to focus on adding value and contribution rather than trying to extract value. And what I mean by that kind of broad statement is that I know a lot of people that are in these kind of grad schemes, take for example accountancy work, and they'll often, let me say they're getting paid £30 an hour, they'll often look at how much they're getting paid and then how much the company is billing out to the client, and they'll see that perhaps the company is billing out £200 to the client. And then what they'll do is they'll get really frustrated because they see that they're getting paid so much less than what they're getting billed at, and this creates a certain level of resentment, and then that person will then start feeling like they should try and, the company's taking advantage of them, so that therefore they should try and take advantage of the company by doing the minimum necessary amount of work or quality of work to tick all the boxes, take as much holiday time as possible, whatever it is. But I've noticed by observing people that do really well, people that make a big impact, is they have a completely different point of view. And that is to always try to add more value than you try to take. So for example, if you're working for a company, realize that for a company to be successful, you have to add more value than you take back in return. A company will only employ people if they're making more money than they're paying those people. And if you're running a business, then think, how can I add more value than I'm charging to the client? What else can you deliver to your client or customer that you're otherwise not delivering? So for example, I mean, if you're in a kind of, you're selling very tangible things where it's more difficult for you to add value without increasing the price, think of what you can add in terms of intangible value, like information products or education. Can you teach your potential customers or clients why your product is so useful or how they can use it to be more effective? And so really start thinking strategically. And when it comes to value, the key to adding value is to think from the other person's perspective. So if you're looking to get a job, think about what your boss's wants or aspirations are, or what challenges he's experiencing or she's experiencing, and try to figure out their perspective so that you can then add more value from what they define as value. And likewise, if you're in a business and you're looking at your potential customers or clients, think about from their perspective, because that's the real way that you can add value. And so overall, to kind of conclude what I've been trying to say here, is the key is to really think strategically. So think about where you want to be in the long term, and consider what your long-term options are, where you want to be, and is where you're going taking you there, because if it isn't, then I'd very much consider you explore other potential options. So thank you very much.